Joining us now to break down the prospect of any coronavirus legislation and other matters on Capitol Hill is Representative Thomas Massie, the congressman serving Kentucky's 4th District. So, Congressman, when we look about another prospect of another coronavirus package, you and I have been talking throughout the entirety of this pandemic about the progress of these bills and whether we need another one, whether it's the appropriate funds, things of that nature. So when it comes to this latest effort, where do you stand?
Well, I don't think we need another one. I think we need to open our economy back up. But what's interesting is Pelosi is now feeling pressure from her own caucus to get the ball rolling here. In fact, 25 of them broke ranks with her this week and worked with 25 Republicans on a much smaller relief package, probably a more reasonable relief package. And she ruled it out as soon as they rolled this out because she said, even though it spends $1.5 trillion, it doesn't spend enough for her.
Right, and it kind of reminds me of back during the impeachment as well, where it's kind of those centrist, moderate Democrats who are kind of saying, you know, this isn't good for my district right now or my reelection prospects, despite the national picture that this is painting. I think this is the exact type of scenario because you're exactly right. We've heard that there are some more centrist, moderate Democrats who are saying we need to do something about this right now because as of right now, it's looking like it's the Democrats holding up all of this as well. But you do say that the reason why that is because of the price tag first, but also because we haven't spent the funds from the initial bill first. And we also don't have our economies open up across the country as well. So if you stimulate the economy by putting money into it, there's nowhere for that money to necessarily go in some of these states. So is the goal right now, do you think, to open up some of these states that are closed?
Well, we absolutely do. My analogy is they want to make another blood transfusion to a patient who's bleeding profusely. We need to stop the bleeding first. And to your point on the moderate Democrats, you know, there are probably only 2 or 3 moderate Democrats in the House, honestly. But there are a lot of Democrats in moderate districts. And when election season comes around, they start moderating their message. Of course, when it's not election season, they go in for the most socialist agenda that Nancy Pelosi puts on the floor, and they all vote in line in lockstep. But right now, they're moderates for the next 47 days, and they are getting nervous.
And this comes to where these negotiations have been hindered because of some outside sources coming in. And I mean that in the sense that it's not a strictly up and down coronavirus relief package. It's, for example, Democrats want to bring in mail-in voting reforms. They want to bring in other things that may not necessarily impact stimulating the economy, but things that could maybe fall under the umbrella of the coronavirus pandemic, but that's a very broad umbrella right now. And I think the most frequently talked about one is the mail-in voting debate. And I know that, for example, you've offered a couple amendments when it comes to that. I know that there's other Republicans on Capitol Hill who aren't in favor of that type of proposal. So where do you stand on that?
Well, the Democrats had a hearing today on postal reform, and they went after Postmaster DeJoy, one of the appointees under Trump, that was appointed, by the way, by a bipartisan commission. And they're trying to say there's a conspiracy afoot at the post office now. So this was a witch hunt today in the Oversight Committee. And I thought it was important to offer a few amendments to call out the hypocrisy of the Democrats. So, for instance, the bill they've introduced would make it so that the Postmaster General can't even engage in politics on his own time or in private life. And so I offered an amendment that said, you know what, there's 15,000 postmasters in the United States. So what's good for the Postmaster General is good for the postmaster. So I offered an amendment to say, okay, if we're going to heighten these restrictions on the Postmaster General, let's do it on the postmasters. Because, Alex, they've dissolved voting precincts in this country right now. And your voting precinct is now your local post office. Now, who's in charge of that precinct? It's 15,000 postmasters who all belong to a union. Okay, and a lot of them are politically active. So my amendment today was shot down by the Democrats. Not a single one of them voted for it. They say we need reform at the Postmaster General's office, but they don't want to reform anything at the post office in terms of keeping this nonpartisan, keeping this election, and the people who collect the ballots, who are now the postmasters. I think they should be nonpartisan.
And, of course, the whole reason we're having this debate is because Democrats are making the argument that in-person voting may not be safe. But we saw former Vice President Joe Biden vote in person in Delaware this week for the Delaware primary. And we also see across the country people gathering in large numbers, whether it's protests, whether it's for even other type of events. We've seen it take take place firsthand, but there's not very much criticism when it comes to those gatherings unless it's a Trump rally, for example, or an event at the White House. So when it comes to the unrest on the streets, for example, and some of the debates that are taking place between Republicans and Democrats, do you think that this is an issue that really highlights the divide between the two parties and what they're looking to do for Americans?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a divide here, and you're seeing it in the protests. I feel sorry for the people who live in the blue states and the blue cities within the blue states, because those mayors and a lot of those police chiefs, unfortunately, who are more political than the rank and file police officers, are kind of holding back the rank and file police officers. A lot of the political prosecutors aren't even prosecuting the most basic crimes of aggression, like theft and arson and assault. And what's happening is you're seeing this movement grow. We should decide these things at a ballot box, right? This is what we do in the United States. We don't burn and loot and assault people if we don't agree with their politics. If we think there need to be new policies, we should do this at the ballot box. We've got 47 days until that's going to be decided. But what you're seeing is a bigger divide between the blue cities and the blue states and the red cities and the red states. And frankly, I've seen a lot of people who want to move to Kentucky. I've seen people moving. It's not just Texas and Florida who are gaining people from New York and California. People want to get even further away from California and New York and some of the more liberal states in the north.
And I can see why, because when you turn on the news, for example, what you're seeing is a group of people who are in the minority with their opinion, that being when it comes to rioting and looting, who are quite literally being the judge, jury, and executioner, depending on if it fits their political mindset. And when we look at polls, for example, the mentality when it comes to rioting and looting is not supported by the general public. So what we're seeing is a minority of Americans taking power into their own hands, and as I was saying, making the decision of who should be punished, how to punish them, and what's going on. And a lot of times it's innocent local business owners who are feeling the wrath of that. So I think that's the issue that is on a lot of voters' minds when they go to the ballot box this November. But Representative Thomas Massie, I really appreciate you coming on the program, breaking down where we stand in regard to coronavirus relief and also what's happening on the streets. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.